Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. Got something a little bit different this time. There's been a bit of a kerfuffle about the Oscars, and isn't that a surprise? Apparently a movie called Emilia Perez, which is about a transgender Mexican gangster. It's a French movie made in Spanish in Mexico, and it's caused a lot of fuss. It's cheesed off people from Mexico. It's cheesed off people in the trans community. It's cheesed off transphobic people. All sorts of stuff. I haven't seen the movie. I wouldn't mind seeing it. If I do, I'll let you know what it's like. But it got me thinking that there's a long history of non-English language movies just not getting any love from the Academy Awards. And I thought I'd talk about that and look at some films that should have been on the Oscar for Best Picture, but weren't because they weren't made in English. We're going back as far as 1937, all the way to the year 2000. So let's get started. 1937, America's award system was a walled garden at that stage. They had the Hays Code, the production code, which stopped the grown-up movies from being made in America without going through a lot of burning hoops. And so the Oscars for that year reflected it. Here are the nominated movies. The Life of Emile Zola, which was a very bowdlerized and censored version of The Life of Emile Zola starring Paul Muni. For those that don't know, Emile Zola was a writer of somewhat saucy novels in the 19th century. The Awful Truth's got one, which was a screwball comedy with Cary Grant and Irene Dunne in it, and it's now kind of forgotten. We had Captain's Courageous with Spencer Tracy, which is based on a Rudyard Kipling novel. Bit of an adventure movie with Spencer Tracy and Freddie Bartholomew in it. A movie called Dead End from 1937, which is a crime drama with Sylvia Sidney, Humphrey Bogart and John McCrea in it. The Good Earth, which is an adaptation of a Pearl Buck novel about Chinese peasants, with Paul Muni and Louise Rayner playing Chinese peasants, even though they were neither of them Chinese. There was In Hot Chicago, which was a proto-disaster flick about the Great Chicago Fire, which starred Tyrone Power, Alice Faye, and Don Amici. Frank Capra's Lost Horizon, which is not a bad film. I love Lost Horizon. I've got it on Blu-ray here. Based on the James Hilton novel about a lost utopia in the Himalayas. It starred Ronald Colman, Jane Whitehead, with Everett Horton was in there as well, and Thomas Mitchell. Great movie. Love it. Haven't got a problem with it. And a Deanna Durban musical called 100 Men and a Girl. That got an Oscar nomination in 1937. There was a kind of drama called Stage Door, which had Katharine Hepburn, Adolphe Menjou, and Ginger Rogers in it. That one's now kind of forgotten because, from what I understand, it wasn't that great. And then, of course, they had the first version of A Star is Born with Janet Gaynor and Frederick March in it. That was nominated as well. The one that won was The Life of Emile Zola, because it was a serious film about a serious subject. But there was a film made in 1937 that for me beats them all. It's a French film, which is marvelous in 100 different ways. In French, it's called Un Carnet de Bal. In English, it was called Life Dances On. It was directed by Julien Duvivier, and it starred a woman called Marie Belle and had a whole bunch of well-known French actors at the time. It's about a woman who's middle-aged. She's quite wealthy, and her husband's just died unexpectedly. She's in her late 30s. Which was middle-aged for that time. And she's going through her stuff and she's trying to deal with where does her life go now? What does she do with the future? And she finds an old dance card from her coming out ball when she was 18 years old. And on the dance card, different men wrote their names so that they could dance with her during that ball. And so she gets into her head the idea that she wants to find out what happened to these guys. None of them she's kept contact with. So she goes on this quest to kind of deal with her past and deal with her youth. And it varies a lot. One of us become a priest and he's very good at teaching children. Another one's become a mountain climber and he's quite adventurous. There are some tragic stories as well. It's about somebody trying to find out where she goes in the future. And it's beautifully done. There are these little vignettes with each of the male characters. And it's just wonderful. It's one of those movies that you watch and it's got a wisdom to it that blows you away. This is one of Scorsese's favorite films. And I watched it and I agree it is probably one of the 10 or 12 best movies I've ever seen in my life. It's extraordinary. It tells the story well. You never quite know where the story of each man's going until the movie reveals it to you. Things could be one thing at the start and then you find out they're actually another. It really is something extraordinary without having guns and violence, without having too much comedy in it. It's an amazing film. It's one of those ones where you think, why doesn't everybody know about this movie? Why doesn't everybody love this movie? So Life Dances On is a high recommend from me. It's a little hard to find. but I've got it on a couple of wish lists of mine, and I've got a couple of watches in eBay, and I definitely want a copy of this film. High recommend for me. That's 1937 covered. It's taken a while. Let's move on. I jumped to 1948. 1948, Hamlet, the version with Laurence Olivier, won the Oscar. The other nominees were Johnny Belinda, which is a kind of women's film with Jane Wyman in it. A little bit of a tragedy about a woman who is not able to hear and her tragic life. The Red Shoes was nominated. Again, it's a fine film. The Red Shoes should have won over Hamlet. A movie called The Snake Pit, which was about mental illness with Olivia de Havilland in it. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre was nominated but didn't win. Again, fantastic John Huston film. Fantastic role by Humphrey Bogart. Fantastic role by Walter Huston as well. That didn't win. Hamlet won because Hamlet was posh. The movie that should have been in there but wasn't in there is Bicycle Thieves, the Italian neo-realist movie, directed by Vittorio De Sica, about a man who needs to support his wife and child in post-war Italy. Things are very tough, and he needs a bicycle to get to and from work. And he finally gets some money to get a bicycle, and it gets stolen. And he and his son search through Rome to find his bicycle. That's a simple story, but it's also a complex story. Beautifully shot in a really documentary look. It's just one of those movies where you think, why don't they make more movies like this now? Why don't they go to the guts of things the way they used to? Why isn't everybody watching this film again? Bicycle Thieves is magnificent and tragic and tough and honest, and it should have beat Hamlet with both hands tied behind its back, as indeed should have The Red Shoes or The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. One of those three. He should have won, but Hamlet won because it's posh, and because it's Shakespeare, because it's Olivier. Now let's look at 1950. All About Eve won. Great film, a lot of fun. Really arch and nasty with sharp dialogue and good acting. Betty Davis is in there, George Sanders and Baxter. Just a great film, but is it the best film of the year? It was Born Yesterday with Judy Holliday in it, a screwball comedy about a gangster who marries a very unusual woman. Father of the Bride with Spencer Tracy, which is a family film about the father of the bride, remade with Steve Martin many decades later. A crowd pleaser, but this is the best film of the year. King Solomon's Mines with Stuart Granger, an adaptation of H. Rider Haggart's novel. Big African adventure film. Sunset Boulevard, you can make an argument for Sunset Boulevard. Arch and bitchy Billy Wilder movie. Gloria Swanson, William Holden, face down in the swimming pool. Again, another good choice. It wasn't a bad year for movies. But were any of those movies as good as Rashomon, the Akira Kurosawa movie about a murder seen from the viewpoint of a number of different characters? Rashomon, with its mise-en-scène of the three men taking shelter underneath a shrine archway in a heavy rainstorm and telling each other stories about what actually happened. And then the stories playing out where you don't quite know what actually happened. Incredibly influential movie, incredibly beautiful, nuanced, and with Shuma Mifune playing a bandit. Should have won. There's not a movie in this lot, with the possible exception of Sunset Boulevard, that's been as influential on other films as Rashomon. Without Rashomon, you don't have Memento. You don't have a whole bunch of other movies. You don't have Strange Darling from last year. That sort of a narrative structure is one that other films have emulated in the 70-odd years since then. Let's move on to 1953. There are some good films in this year, but there's one that beats them all. There's one that beats any movie from any decade since then. The movie that won was From Here to Eternity. Big, bold adaptation of a James Jones novel about a couple of love affairs, just as Pearl Harbor is being bombed in World War II. Not a bad film. Montgomery Clift's good, Deborah Carr's good, Burt Lancaster's good. Honest film, but I don't know if it's the best of the year. In fact, I know it's not. There was an adaptation of Julius Caesar, which had Marlon Brando in it. Very stagey. It was filmed all on a soundstage. It looks like it. It's not a bad adaptation of the Shakespeare play. But again, is it the best film of the year? The Robe. Big widescreen biblical epic about the robe that somebody covered Jesus with after he fell off the cross. Richard Burton's in it. Really big, pious, pompous movie. It was not the best movie of 1953. Roman Holiday. Little bit of froth with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn playing a runaway princess in Rome. It's a travelogue kind of movie. It's a meet cute. It's a romantic film. It's not bad, but it's not world-shatteringly new. It's not world-shatteringly new and original. And then there's Shane. Fantastic Alan Ladd movie. Jack Palance is in there. Van Heflin's in there. Jean Arthur. Brendan DeWild. A pared-down Western and a good one. But none of them can even come close to Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story. About a family in post-war Japan just living their lives. And Ozu turns it into something that's profound and moving and fascinating and just mind-blowing. This movie, you watch it and it sits with you for days. It is one of the most extraordinary pieces of cinema in the history of the world. And not enough people have seen it. It turns the ordinary things of life into something extraordinary. There are things in this movie we can all relate to, and there are things in this movie that touch us because we have those touchstones in our own lives. Tokyo Story, if you haven't watched it, you should. If you collect physical media, it should be right there in your collection. It is one of the most extraordinary pieces of cinema ever made, and it beats any of these other movies without even trying. Let's just jump a little bit forward to 1954. Again, there are some good movies in here. On the Waterfront one. Elia Kazan's movie, and Elia Kazan was on the nose at the time, and probably to this day, because he named names to the House Un-American Activities Committee. The Caine Mutiny, great Humphrey Bogart role, an adaptation of Herman Wouk's novel. Good ensemble cast about a mutiny on an American naval ship as the captain, Captain Queek, played by Bogart, loses his marbles. Tough movie, really well acted. It's an intense film, and it's a good one. The Country Girl with Bing Crosby and Grace Kelly in it, about an actor. This one got a release from Imprint Films and is quite well regarded, but for me, it's just not a movie I like. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, big widescreen MGM musical. I like it. The subject matter is a little problematic, but it's still a good, solid MGM musical of the time with fantastic songs and terrific dancing. That one I like, but I don't know if it's the best movie of any year. And Three Coins in the Fountain, which is a women's film about three American expatriate girls who throw coins into the Trevi Fountain to make wishes for love and how their love lives go after that. It's very much a movie of its time, and it's very much a women's film of its time. But I don't know that's the best movie of the year. And again, I've got to go with the Kurosawa film. There's another Kurosawa film further in this list. But Seven Samurai, you can't go past it. Seven Samurai is better than On the Waterfront, The Caine Mutiny, Country Girl, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and Three Coins in the Fountain. Fantastic movie. When I was in Tokyo, I went to the outside of Toho Studios, and there's an enormous 3 or 4 story mural of the Seven Samurai on the wall. When I was there, looking at that mural, you felt you were somewhere special. You felt you're somewhere at a cultural nexus for the world by being at Toho Studios and looking at that mural of Seven Samurai. There's a feeling I got there that moved me in a really strange way. And for me, that's the movie of the year. It's one that should have won. So let's take a look at 1955. There's Marty, Paddy Chayefsky's movie for which Ernest Borgnine won an Oscar, which is very much a working class character piece. Not a bad film. It's a good, solid film, and Borgnine was never better than in this one. But I don't know if it's the best film. I think it was a sop to the working class by the Academy. There is Love is a Many Splendid Thing, which is a really weird film. It's a big-scale, Hong Kong-based romance film with William Holden and Jennifer Jones. And in it, Jennifer Jones plays Han Soo-yin, a real-life woman who was the basis for the film. Han Soo-yin was half Chinese, half Belgian. Jennifer Jones was from Oklahoma and white. So you got Yellowface in there. It's a movie that hasn't aged well one tiny bit. William Holden and Jennifer Jones hated each other's guts during the making of the film. There's Mr. Roberts, which was a service comedy. It's funny, it's okay. It's got really good supporting cast, including Jack Lemmon in a breakthrough role. Picnic, which is a big picturesque drama comedy thing with William Holden, Kim Novak's in there as well. It's a good film. I enjoy watching Picnic. I've actually got a copy of it here, but I don't know it's the best movie of its year. And The Rose Tattoo, which is an adaptation of a Tennessee Williams play with Burt Lancaster and Anna Magnani in it. It's a good film, but it's not as good as Rafifi, Jules Dassin's French crime drama with John Servet playing Le Stéphanois. It's got the best heist scene in any movie, where the guys break into a jeweler store from a store above it all done in 22 minutes of no dialogue. If you ever wanted to break into a 1950s French jeweler shop, this is the template movie for it. Fantastic film. Rafifi is just perfect at what it does. And it is so much better than Love is a Many-Spirited Thing, amongst other things. Rock solid movie. It's got a lot of respect in years since, but it was not even looked at for an Oscar. Let's zip pan on to 1962. Nominees. Again, it's one of those years that had some good films in it, some superb films. Lawrence of Arabia won, and rightly so. Amongst the nominees, it was the 300-pound gorilla in the room. The Longest Day, a big, long movie about the D-Day invasions at Normandy. Big cast in it. Good film. Logistically, incredibly difficult to make. The Music Man, musical with Robert Preston and Shirley Jones in it. A bit of fun. It's good to watch. It's kind of about 10 years after it should have been made. It's there, and for some reason it got on the Oscar list. The second version of Mutiny on the Bounty as well, which is a good film. Trevor Howard and Marlon Brando in it. We know the story. Fletcher Christian, William Bligh, Pitcairn Island, all that kind of stuff. Topless Tahitian women. And To Kill a Mockingbird. That one probably... It was a tough year with Lawrence of Arabia and To Kill a Mockingbird on it. So both of those films I've got no problem with at all if they had won. But there are a couple of non-English language movies that should have been on that list and weren't. For a start, you got La Dolce Vita. Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita, which every time I watch it, I get taken to another world and I get taken to a place in a time that probably didn't exactly exist, but kind of did. Marvelous movie. Marcello Mastroianni, Anita Ekberg, Yvonne Furneaux, an experience of a film. And then we've got Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7. I talked about this on the channel before. It's about a woman who's a pop star and a model who is living out an afternoon in her life when she's waiting to hear from some doctors whether she has cancer or not. And she's basically, all of her artifice is stripped off her life during those hours as she goes about her business and lives her life and just moves around Paris, eventually reaching the hospital where she's got to get the news of what's happening. It's a magnificent film, marvelously non-masculine, and I love the film. Every time I watch it, I fall in love with it just a little bit more. So either of those should have been on the list, but again, this was a strong year. 1962 punched above its weight when it came to Oscar nominations, but those two films should have been on the list. 1963. Tom Jones won. Not Tom Jones. It's not unusual, Tom Jones, but Tom Jones, the movie with Albert Finney, based on the Henry Fielding novel. That Tom Jones won because people wanted a bawdy romp with lots of buxom women in frilly blouses and a bit of slap and tickle in there. Elia Kazan's America. America was nominated as well, which was a little bit of a romantic play about his life as a child of immigrants. Cleopatra was nominated, of course. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Enormously big, bombastic film with an incredibly troubled history of getting made. And it lost a ton of money, and it was big scale Hollywood filmmaking that did not make its money back. How the West was won. Big, broad. I think this one was in Cinerama as well. Enormously widescreen movie with the history of American white colonization moving west across the country. A big film. I've seen it recently, like in the last 5 years, and it's an impressive film. And that weird aspect ratio of Cinerama, where the people in the center of the film are really close up, the people off the side are really further back, didn't look good in any format I've ever seen it in, but it is an impressive achievement. Lilies of the Field, of course, Sidney Poitier, one of those earnest films about race, which now seems a little bit earnest and a little bit kind of tentative about the subject of race. But the one that should have won but didn't is, again, a Kurosawa film, a modern day crime film called High and Low, with Toshiro Mifune in it. It's about a businessman played by Toshiro Mifune who gets a phone call saying his son's been kidnapped and that there's an enormous ransom to be paid to get his son back. And the family thinks his son's been kidnapped, but he isn't. The son of his servant has been kidnapped, but the ransom demands stay the same. And Toshiro Mifune's businessman needs the money. He's about to buy out the company he's working for. And everything in his life is based on this. And he comes up with this moral dilemma of, do I give these criminals all this money I've got saved to fulfill the dreams for me and my family, or do I let the son of my servant die? Incredible crime movie. Beautifully shot. Fantastic locations. The blocking in this film where the dialogue moves from one character to another as they move around and the camera follows them is incredible. If you're a film student, you ever wanted to make a film in your life, High and Low is one of those movies that's got to be near the top of your list. It is an incredible piece of filmmaking and deserved to be an Oscar nominee for that year. But of course it wasn't. Then we're moving up to the year 2000 with the last film I've got for you. In the year 2000, Gladiator won. Ridley Scott's Gladiator, a movie which singularly didn't impress me. Didn't like it at all. Ridley Scott's movies very rarely moved me emotionally. They're just workmanlike. Even though Rusty Crowe is good in the film, and of course it's the last role of Oliver Reed. It's got Joaquin Phoenix in it. It's got a whole bunch of different people. Just didn't impress me. The other nominees were Chocolat with Julia Binoche, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is a beautiful film. It turns wuxia into magic, and really an impressive, deserving to be on the list. It probably should have beaten Gladiator if there was any kind of justice in these kind of awards. Erin Brockovich with Albert Finney and Julia Roberts about a court case about poisoned water in an American town. Legal dramas always kind of hit well with audiences. Traffic, which is about the drug trade on a very large scale, which is a good movie. The original version, I think, was a television thing, and I think the original version for me was better. But the movie that should have been on there, but isn't, and is singularly missing from the Oscar noms, Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, Maggie Cheung, Tony Leung, one of the most romantic movies of all time. It's an update on Brief Encounter in some ways. It's about two people living in little apartments next to each other who fall in love when they find out that their partners are having an affair. Incredibly beautifully shot. It's referenced, of course, in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Just such a romantic and intense movie. It should have been on this list. And I don't really like anybody who thinks that In the Mood for Love is a worse film than Gladiator. It really is something extraordinary and something moving and touching and incredibly beautiful. It's also got some incredible needle drops on the soundtrack as well. That one you should watch. I'm going to watch it again soon, I think, because I really want to rewatch it and re-experience that film. So that's my list of the movies that should have been at least nominated for Best Picture Academy Awards, but weren't. Let me know what you think of the list, whether you think I've missed out anything that should have been on the list as well. Fortunately, things have moved on since the early days, and that walled garden of Oscar nominations, where it used to be just Hollywood movies, has opened up somewhat, and somewhat controversially at times. There are still people that think only American films should be nominated for Oscars, where I've just proven that the best films in the world are not made in the English language in America. So let me know what you think and what your suggestions would be for those Oscar noms. And that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies, by becoming a channel member or donating through YouTube. People who are Patreon supporters or donate to the channel or channel members still in the running for this giveaway I'm doing of Eyes Without a Face, the Umbrella box set. That's going to the end of January, and I'm going to announce the winner on my live stream on the first Monday of February. That's a lovely box set, 4K and Blu-ray, so that's still going. So next up I have the Wednesday video, which is going to be very cool, and then of course we'll get back to Science Fiction Saturday again. So until that stuff happens, watch some good movies. Don't watch any bad movies this time. Let's have a little bit of a break from watching bad films, satisfying and comforting as they can be. So don't watch any bad films, and I'll catch you next time.